You take this Jeffrey Epstein conversation and why they don't want the files released. Again, Epstein was the middleman for AIPAC. AIPAC wanted Epstein to entertain congressional and leaders in Washington, D.C. by taking them to their island. The reason they don't want to release the Epstein files is because you don't want to see all these names of these people that will automatically be associated with taking advantage of young girls. That is politics. Thank you, Benny, for having me. Glad to be here and glad to have this conversation.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for coming, man. Before, we got a lot to discuss, all right? But before we kind of get into all the juiciness of the conversation, let's talk about Brandon Brown. Who is Brandon Brown?
Well, I'm a fifth-generation South Carolinian. I've been vice president of 3 HBCUs. I've been the chief deputy tax commissioner of Chatham County, which is in Savannah. And I also work within my family's small business. We own 2 local mortuaries in the upstate. I am passionate about people, and I'm a man of deep faith. I believe that before you can love your neighbor, you got to first love yourself. And so I'm in this race because I have compassion about people. And I want to serve people, not power.
I like that. So you talk a lot in your campaign about people receiving a fair shot. What are some examples that you've seen or experienced yourself in South Carolina where people haven't been getting their fair shot?
Well, a fair shot stems off of you should not be judged with your health care based on your paycheck. Okay. Right now, we know across South Carolina, the state minimum wage is $7.25. You can't go into Burger King and get a Whopper combo for $7.25, but you expect somebody to work a whole hour. Our wage should be somewhere north of $20. That's a fair wage. A fair shot should be healthcare shouldn't cost you more to have to decide if you have to pay for your rent or pay for your health care.
Right.
And so we are fighting because it's easier for somebody to get qualified to pay a rent in a townhouse of $1,500 versus being able to qualify for a mortgage of $800. And so it's not a fair shot in the ballparks behind us in the beginning.
Looking at the landscape, the overall landscape of how politics is today, how it's discussed, how people carry on with it, do you think that fear is the business model of politics?
This president operates off fear, threats, belittling people, and the culture has been so poisonous that people on both sides of the aisle can't get together and govern. And so what we're seeing even here today in South Carolina with this redistricting is the president's retaliation on Jim Clyburn. Anybody stands up to this president, the president then he sends his people to create chaos. And we have to have leaders that stand up and try to challenge people to bring back the decency and dignity in politics versus this divisive nature that we've been seeing.
So people hear politicians promise healthcare reform every election cycle. What makes this year different? What makes your approach different, I would say?
27 million Americans have lost their health care. We know that on average it's about $15,000 a year for a person under 30 for health care. We need to be expanding Medicaid and Medicare. What makes a difference is I've seen people that go without their insulin and die firsthand at the funeral home. I've seen that we have a critical crisis with high blood pressure, diabetes, also cholesterol. And then now the trending data is showing us that arthritis is a growing crisis in our communities. So I want to be an advocate to say to the new governor and who that is, we have paid tax dollars into a system. We are sending our tax dollars and money from Medicaid to other places. We need to bring it back to South Carolina. And that's what I'm going to be working on day one because I want to drive down the cost of health care and cost of prescription drugs.
So a follow-up question on that. I do see many people advocating, particularly Democrats, advocating for Medicaid, Medicare expansions. But what about the other population? Because you have people, who are insured by their workplace or whatever. What can be done and it could just be your ideas. It doesn't have to be something solid. But what do you think can be done to reduce costs in that area?
Well, we are a society of capitalism, so we believe in generating profits to better position yourselves for a better quality of life. So I think within our workforce that we need to be putting incentives within companies that actually help support their employees by providing health care with bigger tax breaks. We want to make sure we drive down that cost. And so I would be actively working, like if a BMW who employs close to, well, more than 8,000 people, they provide health care. They should not be penalized providing that, but we should be expanding on that footprint and encouraging other businesses to use their model. Prisma Healthcare System is the largest healthcare system in the state of South Carolina. We need to be looking at ways that we can find to help cut costs down by paying for students going through medical programs, nursing, pharmacy, also medical doctors in specific areas. Bringing down that cost, what you have to pay for that education, is going to bring down the cost of healthcare. And then we want to regulate insurance companies so to make sure that folks just can't just sue doctors and people in the healthcare industry. So we want to do all those things to drive the cost down.
Nice. And that sounds good. And many people may, take that and be motivated by it. And then others might look at it and be like, okay, well, this just might mean that I'm going to pay more taxes if you're expanding Medicaid. This might mean that more government is going to be involved. What do you say to those people?
Well, that's a good question. And right now, based on what you're paying for taxes now, your taxes not going to go up. The problem is our state government doesn't accept the money from the federal government. They turn it away.
Wow.
All we got to do is accept it and use it. And then you can keep the rural hospitals open. And that's what's been the challenge is in the past years that these organizations, instead of taking and accepting and expanding, they say, no, we don't want it.
How much of the housing crisis do you believe is corporate greed versus failed government policy?
Well, even when Secretary Margie Fudge was there, he spoke to this. You see regentrification programs, you see the ability to push people out in the rural communities instead of making housing affordable. Here in South Carolina alone, we need to build more than 75,000 new affordable homes for people. We want to work with the Department of HUD and make sure that we're doing everything responsibly to drive down the cost of what it is for a first-time buyer. Make sure that these students graduating from college have somewhere good to live with quality. And people who have lived in dilapidated homes that just need assistance because they're working every day but they can't get ahead. So I want to be that senator that's going to be coming up with solutions instead of just pushing the problem on somebody else.
I like that. So you've worked at HBCUs, held leadership positions in higher level education. What have those experiences taught you about inequalities that maybe statistics don't even show?
Well, the myth that if you go off to college that you can graduate and get rich, that's just a myth. You actually have to go work. And what I've learned is students just want an opportunity. And that federal Pell Grant provides us an opportunity. If many of our doctors and lawyers and scientists, if they hadn't had that Pell Grant, they wouldn't have got over the threshold. Right. So we need to be expanding federal Pell, SEOG, which is Student Equal Opportunity Grant, and then we need to be regulating these loaning institutions so they don't drive up the cost with interest, so if you don't have to work 30 years to pay off your student loan debt. If you go into a rural community and you teach for 5 years, forgive your entire student loan debt. We need to be utilizing everything possible to drive down the cost of what it takes to go to college, but to also make sure that we have a pathway clear. So when you do graduate, you can get a good paying job, and then you can start your family and then look at the fruits of labor.
Nice. So I saw on your website that you talked about gerrymandering. Could you explain to the audience, the average American, how reshaping, political districts can control political power?
It comes down to, based on the Civil Rights Act, it comes down to making sure that we had districts where people actually had representation. So what we're seeing now is the Supreme Court striking down parts of that bill. It's saying that you can't draw a district based on the color of somebody's skin,
Right.
but you can draw a district based on somebody's political party.
Right.
And so what we're doing now and seeing in South Carolina, particularly in the General Assembly, is they're attempting to draw out Jim Clyburn's seat. But what they're doing is putting populations in other areas. Think about this. The University of South Carolina and Clemson University will be in one congressional district together. That is hilarious. But what they don't see is because they split the 6th district, they put more black people in the 2nd district, so that district now becomes more competitive. So now instead of getting rid of one congressman, we're probably going to end up with 2. So I think what they're doing is actually going to have an adverse effect on what they thought they were doing.
Oh, okay. Wow. So do you think that we could, like, just America in general, because from me reading on it, there's 2 different types of maps. You got the congressional map, and then you have like one that actually involves the state a lot more. Do you think that we would overall benefit from more balanced maps or competitive maps?
I think that for far too long, the problem has been people depend on black people not voting. The expectation is black people and poor people are not going to participate in the political process because they don't believe that they have a voice that's being heard. You could leave the maps alone, but if you empower people, we could flip seats. And that starts with people are not paying attention to politics. The average person doesn't watch TV.
Right.
Average person's thinking about putting food on the table. Right now, most people ain't caring about this redistricting. They caring about the gas price $5.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just being real. I mean, but we got to start speaking directly to the people about what are your issues and why this is so important for you to get out and vote.
Do you think that people have lost faith in democracy?
I think many people have. You got a guy that said the other day that he wasn't cared about your pocketbook. He was cared about his war in Iran. You got people that want to kiss Donald Trump's butt so much that they don't care about what's going on in an average place like in Allendale, where there's food deserts, or up in Florence, where there's a high veteran homeless population. Limestone University closed. Our 2 United States senators didn't call a corporation to ask them to give a loan, only needed $3 million to keep the doors open. How can you trust a system when you see people are only serving power and billionaires, not taking care of working class people?
Okay, so rapid question, because you mentioned Donald Trump. If you could have a private conversation with him, what would you want to discuss? What would you want to convey to him?
That people are hurting, and he keeps accepting gifts from different foreign countries while the American people are suffering. And how is he going to speak to causing us to get back to be civil? He just did $1.8 billion to give the people who attacked police officers on the January 6th day. How, as the president, is he going to reunite the country? And I would want a sincere, honest answer on that.
Okay. What can be done about crime in our cities? Because I know that's really, at least me, that's something that I care about a lot, especially coming from Sumter, South Carolina. You have places like Sumter, Columbia, Orangeburg. What can be done, truly done, like policy-wise, to just get crime under control?
First thing we got to do, it starts with the education system. First thing we got to do is we have to create mentoring programs to create ideas of I can be somebody. Our culture, particularly African-American young men, is that we want to rely on just sports a lot. Well, we want to challenge people to think. We have to look at when a high school student is getting ready to graduate, what does the transitional period look like? We have to create pathways to free technical college. If you train somebody with a good ability to do plumbing, electrician, to look at landscaping, to look at excavation, creating a good job gets somebody in the mindset of then getting a good home, starting a family. But again, it comes down to having a livable wage. $7.25, it's not working. It's 26. And we can stop a lot of this by engagement, getting people in the local economies, good manufacturing jobs in place. And it comes down to compassion and not just taking for granted and turning away.
What makes you different than other Democrat candidates running?
You know, I do not want to see people go without food. I do not want to see our citizens have to fight for resources to go out for education. And I am the candidate that is standing truth to power. AIPAC is a lobbying organization that supports genocide in Gaza. I am not accepting any money from AIPAC. I believe in this democracy. I voted for Joe Biden in the Democratic primary. I did not vote in the Republican primary. And as Democrats, we believe in debate. And I have called for my components in this election cycle, the primary, to debate. And when you don't debate, I think there is something you're hiding. And particularly Dr. Annie Andrews, who you won't debate, I would call upon you to stand up and be a Democrat and not run like a Republican.
Like that. I like that. Maybe y'all need to come debate on this show.
I would love for you to host us with a debate.
Okay.
And if you extend it to Dr. Andrews, I'll show up anywhere in South Carolina she wants to be.
Okay. Let's do it. Let's do it, man. So what gives you hope that you can, or maybe you can be someone to help bring back the country together?
You know, growing up in the South, I was very fortunate. A lot of people didn't have their four grandparents. You know, a lot of people didn't grow up with a father in their house. My dad, growing up, ran one of the local community centers. As he was teaching school, he would get out and run a local gymnasium. And seeing all these poor people come and participate in playing basketball and having after-school programs. What gives me the hope is when I see people I grew up with that didn't have a fair shot working and have families, and their children now are going off and graduating colleges and getting paid jobs, getting good paying jobs. When I see people that understand the compassion of we are a community. Community means common unity. We have more in common than that divides us. And so we have to educate each other about our history, teach each other about our future, and bring people together for this community of people of faith. And I follow a God who teaches us love, who sent his son to teach us and give us the pathway to eternal life. And I know he hasn't abandoned us.
So what is it about Congress, man? Like just being on as a 20-year-old, 26, being on social media, seeing, politics being so polarizing, everybody arguing both sides. What is it to where like we just can't find common ground?
Politics in the word itself means persuasion. It means getting somebody to identify with your viewpoint. And for so long, people say, oh, I'm a conservative and I'm a Christian, but then they go against the fundamental principles of Christianity. What we're seeing is the representation of people trying to stay in power. And staying in power means cutting off the fair play field and only going with the big money and power. You take this Jeffrey Epstein conversation and why they don't want the files released. Again, Epstein was the middleman for AIPAC. AIPAC wanted Epstein to entertain congressional and leaders in Washington, D.C. by taking them to their island. The reason they don't want to release the Epstein files is because you don't want to see all these names of these people that will automatically be associated with taking advantage of young girls. That is politics.
So what message do you give to people who feel politically homeless? Because me personally, I see myself as an independent. I may lean conservative as far as like my values, what I believe in politically, but I still have an open ear to Democrats. So what do you say to the independent voter?
Independent voters need to educate themselves on every candidate their platforms, their policies, where they align, and what will they actually do to provide solutions to make life easier. I have a plan published on my website, the Fair Shop Plan. I have a plan published on my website dealing with rights for women. There is no federal law stating right now that a man's body has to be regulated by the government. But we have this saying that a woman's body has to be regulated by the government. This is supposed to be a country of freedoms. I want people to really understand the fundamental freedoms and how we have the ability to protect those freedoms. And so independence, I believe if we sit down and create the dialogue, you'll see that we line up just about on all these positions.
So what do you feel as if you can do to better the landscape of left versus right?
Well, it shouldn't be left versus right. It should just be right.
Okay.
And what's right is protecting health care, education, making sure grandma gets her insulin, making sure you shouldn't have to choose between buying food and paying your mortgage. Right now, we shouldn't be paying $5 for gas. And so what I want to do is bring back common sense. Fritz Hollins and Senator Thurmond went to Washington, D.C. and always fought for South Carolina. They didn't go over to Israel. They didn't go to Venezuela. They fought for South Carolinians. And that's what Brandon Brown will do. And by the way, Brown won't let you down.
I like that. Do you have any closing statements, any closing remarks you want to make?
I just want to again thank you for allowing me on this podcast today. It's talented people like you that are reaching out and capturing audience that need to pay attention to these social justice issues. And I'm asking all you young folks out there to make sure you're registered to vote, to make sure you exercise your right that many people died for. We were brought over here in chains, and we built this country. And it's time for us to, instead of letting Jim Crow come back, to stand up and fighting against it and fighting for our rights. Go to my website, brandonpbrown.com, and I look forward to coming back and debating Annie Andrews on this podcast.